Behind me is the E92 BMW M3, the V8 edition, featuring an 8,400 RPM redline. This is the only V8 M3 to ever come out of BMW. We're in for a hell of a ride with what some people say is the best M3 ever made. I'm Alex, your host, and join me for Test Drive E92 M3. For this test drive, we have one question. If you ask BMW fanboys what their favorite M3 was, a lot of them are going to circle E92. Why is that? It's the V8 that sits right underneath this hood here and the soundtrack that it produces. So our question is this: having already test driven the 2024 M4 competition, we have a great perspective to answer the question that we have for this test drive, which is, did BMW peak with the E92 M3 that we have here? Camouflaged under this little bump in the hood is a 4.0 liter V8 good for 414 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. That V8's good to get this E92 M3 from 0 to 60 in 4.3 seconds. The quarter mile passes by at 12.8 at 113 miles an hour. In Europe, this car can go 178 miles an hour, but here in the US, it was electronically limited to only 155. You might notice on either side of the swollen hood here, two vents, and they are functional. That side lets the engine exhale, while on this side, it's actually the intake that's attached to this vent closest to me. And you can hear the engine really roar and gasp for air as you're getting on it, just sitting a couple feet behind. So you'll recall we drove the M4 that was equipped with the competition package. This M3 actually is also equipped with the competition package, but don't relate the two. That one for the M4 was more about power. This one for the M3 is more about handling. The competition package on this E92 lowered the suspension 10 millimeters for a lower center of gravity. It also included automatically this EDC mode, the electronic dampening control, which are essentially adaptive dampers, and I will say are really phenomenal on this M3, despite them being a very early set of adaptive dampers. And then last, that package included 19-inch forged alloy wheels, which are lighter in nature. While this is a unique package to have on this era of M3, it's not quite as essential as what I would say you need the competition package for the M4 of the modern generation, because of course that brings a good bit more power. If you were to accuse this M3 of having an image problem, you might be on the right track, because one thing BMW was very concerned about when they brought the V8 to this E92 was the weight and the subsequent handling effects that would come with that extra weight. So what you see scattered around this car are carbon fiber bits, whether it's the mirrors, the ducktail spoiler, or the roof. Combine that with a mainly aluminum chassis, and BMW fought really hard to keep this thing trim. It fought really hard to keep this thing only at 3,700 pounds. That's pretty amazing considering that the new BMW 5 Series and M5 way more than most Hummers used to. So BMW's really strayed from trying to keep that weight down like they did on this M3. Let's talk transmission options for a moment. When this M3 debuted, it only came with a 6-speed manual. Fast forward a little bit and you do have a 7-speed dual clutch transmission, DCT, in this M3 that we're driving today. You know, this is a pretty good automatic. It snaps shifts off like that. Dual clutch, so they're always ready. But I will say one thing, at lower speeds, and this was like this with the SMG transmission of the E46 generation before it, at lower speeds, this car kind of hesitates. It doesn't exactly know what you want to do. So when you're in a parking lot, give yourself an extra few seconds, because just even backing into a spot makes it look like you need a little extra time. Honestly, you'd be much more efficient with a manual transmission. But again, once you get rolling, this transmission is fantastic. In today's day and age, it's hard to believe whether or not anything you see is real, whether it's AI generated or something fake like the exhaust noise that comes out of the modern day Dodge Charger speaker system. Well, there's no faking the soundtrack that comes out of the back. This E92 M3 is the pinnacle of sound when it comes to M3s. I think it's the pinnacle of feel when it comes to M3s too, because you're able to rev it out higher than any other M3, whether it's been inline 6 or turbocharged option. No, I think that this car is a work of art. You know, I've got to say, it's a little weird in this era, hearing a turbocharged whistle from the Porsche Carrera next to us, while hearing an audacious V8 roar from the BMW M3. In my mind, if there's one thing that BMW M cars have always done better than any other of its competition, it's that you can beat the ever-living hell out of these cars and they keep giving that experience back to you with no fade. Well, one downside of having the E92 and its high revving small V8 is the most common maintenance item is rod bearing failure, and that is a catastrophic item if not prevented. If you float around the forums long enough, they tell you that you should get your rod bearings replaced in your E92 M3 before 60,000 miles preventatively, because those are the most common failed item on this M3's V8. And of course, if the rod bearings do go, it's game over for your engine. There it goes. That's the end of the story. So if you have a higher mileage M3, you should get the rod bearings replaced, and that'll run you anywhere from $2,000 to around $4,500, depending on who and where you get it done. You've got a pretty straightforward brake setup here. Steel rotors, 14.2 inches up front, 13.8 inches in the rear, ventilated and cross-drilled. These M3 brakes bite when you want them to. Haven't had a chance to really track them, so I don't know just how much fade you see in steel rotors versus typical carbon ceramic, but these brakes clamp down. They're great for this M3 and more than anything you need.
While the E92 doesn't have preset drive modes like what you see in modern day, it does have several interchangeable settings that can change your driving experience.
So you have different features here, a few buttons here. EDC, again, that's electronic damping control. Right below the shifter, you have this button that looks almost like a volume button. And essentially what that is the aggressiveness of the transmission in its highest setting. When you're snapping off gears, even doing it by the paddles, it's cutting torque right before it shifts and almost gives you that pop. You can definitely chirp the wheels going gear to gear. And of course, if you put it down in its softest setting, it's almost like a comfort mode. Now, one button that's in this cluster you may have noticed, it says power. That is one of the most gimmicky buttons that BMW M cars have ever had. In the E46, I believe it was called sport mode. But basically, when you press that button, it doesn't increase power. It just increases the touchiness of the throttle. You know, I say this doesn't really have driving modes and the true select your driving mode option, but it does have the M mode here right on the steering wheel. wheel. What happens when you press that is it will put the car into your preferred EDC and put the shift aggressiveness to your liking as well. So while it doesn't necessarily have a true driving mode that you can select and go through, it does have that M button that'll snap to your preferred driving settings like that.
As I've mentioned, while this adaptive suspension isn't anything quite as complex as what we've seen on those GM vehicles like the Corvette and the Cadillac, the impressive hydraulic dampers used here weren't a standard feature on every M3. There are 3 straightforward modes easily set with the EDC button:
Comfort, Normal, and Sport. There's not a whole lot of technology behind this. There's no sensor in the bumper reading the road, trying to adjust or predict what's going on. No, essentially what these modes do is take your throttle input, steering input, and it even has a sensor on the wheel to see how fast you're spinning, and will adjust the suspension based on whether you're braking hard in a corner or how it thinks you're driving. So nothing overly complex about it. And for my part, I would say that you're going to be more than comfortable and 99% of the time in normals. Comfort's a little soft and Sport is a little stiff. Normal, most of the time with these dampers, are going to give you a good ride. All right, if there's one area of controversy, maybe with this M3, it would be the styling. I think it's a very distinct look that this M3 brought, different than the others. You kind of have a bulky look, like somebody that's been hitting the gym a lot. Of course, you have the swollen hood here to fit the 4.0 liter V8. One thing that I'm not a big fan of though, is all the carbon fiber. One thing very common on the E92 was this carbon fiber roof. Matter of fact, if you didn't choose a sunroof, that is what came with the E92.
BMW talks about how this carbon fiber roof weighs a minuscule 11 pounds less than a traditional steel roof and a slightly more substantial 45 pounds less than a sunroof equipped model.
So they say not only does this increase structural rigidity and handling of the car, it saves weight too. Matter of fact, there are some magazines that said you're not really an M enthusiast if you don't choose the carbon fiber roof. Me? Complete opposite. I think unless you're towing your M3 around track to track, you're probably daily driving it or at least looking to enjoy it, and you're going to enjoy the sunroof better. Now, those are fairly rare to get your hands on. It's hard to find one that didn't have this carbon fiber roof. I don't think carbon fibers aged as well as people hoped it would back in the late 2000s. Really, if you had kept it steel, I think this car would be better looking. Now, is this better looking than the E46 M3 that came before it? I don't necessarily think so. Is it better than the F80 generation that came after it? Probably not, in my opinion either. Is it better looking though than the M4 competition that we tested to start out this channel? I do think so. I think that you have a great looking BMW here and it is distinct, but is it the best looking M3 of all time? Probably not. You know, the Silverstone metallic paint that we have here is pretty unique looking. I don't really love the fact that it's a blend between baby blue and silver, like it's really can't make up its mind. I think it's a good looking color. My preference would be either in metallic silver or all black for the M3 though. Or maybe red, but that would cost a lot. The only car I've gotten pulled over on this channel so far has been a red car, so maybe something to it. So you do have control of a few different performance features right here on this. So if it's me and you have a choice, I'd say go for the 2-door, not 4-door. Go for the coupe, not the convertible. And instead of getting this carbon fiber roof, find one that has a 6-speed manual transmission and an openable sunroof. When it comes to the interior, I'd say it's both comfortable and fairly handsome, if not kind of bare bones. Thank God there's no carbon fiber on the inside of this car because I do think that it's very handsome and there's nothing over the top. It's just a very plain executive interior that I think has aged well. Obviously, a ton of buttons. The iDrive system is a little annoying. They decided to put the controller for the iDrive right here in lieu of cup holders. So for the second car in a row, Germans have thwarted us Americans by putting cup holders popping out in the dash, which essentially means don't even consider bringing drinks in this car because they're going to flop around. I don't know what it is with you guys. You know, we like to drink coffee on the way to work. We don't all just have an obsession with having a big gulp soda, I promise you.
This generation of M3s had a number of different audio options depending on year and region that even sometimes confused BMW owners. This M3 though had a mid-level system, but the golden standard was a bar set high by a premium 16-speaker audio system available as an option on the M3.
You know, I've always said that this generation of M3, for being the top trim within the 3 Series, came a little under-equipped when it comes to comfort features. For example, you don't have any kind of heated or ventilated seats here, no heated steering wheel, no sunroof, no adaptive cruise control, no blind spot monitoring. Hell, you don't even have a rear camera for when you're backing up in this M3, despite obviously a number of other vehicles having it around the time this vehicle debuted. So, no, really, you have a very plain muscle car-like experience with this. And when it comes to what you're looking for driving it, that's really what you're coming here for anyways. So I talked about how the Corvette in the Corvette video had a very square steering wheel. Well, we're back to comfy, contour to your hand, making sense of ergonomic steering wheels here with the BMW M3. It's got a thick wheel, pretty thick grip in your hand. I love these paddle shifters. They are so solid. And again, when it comes to the total driving experience, everything adds up. And BMW just got so many things right for the entirety of this car that makes it such a gem. When it comes to competitors, you could really draw a number of V8 naturally aspirated cars from that era, whether it's the Lexus ISF, or you wanted to pit this against something more like a Porsche. No, when I think of the E92 M3, I think of 2 competitors specifically, and they are both within Germany. You have the Audi RS5, which is powered by a naturally aspirated V8, and then the Mercedes C63 AMG, which was also powered by a naturally aspirated V8 of that time. I think all 3 of these cars played off each other. Think about it. All of those cars at that time had naturally aspirated V8s for the only time ever. Now, fast forward to 2025, the M4 nowadays utilizes a twin-turbo inline-6. The Audi RS5, same thing, twin-turbo V6. Go to the Mercedes C63, the one that used to have the biggest naturally aspirated V8. Well, it doesn't even use a V6 anymore. It's a turbocharged inline-4 hybrid setup. One thing I always talk about is feel, how these cars make you feel. Revving up a naturally aspirated V8 to 8,400 RPMs is a phenomenal feeling, and I don't care how fast EVs go in the future, it's not going to bring that same feel. And it's pretty easy to argue that that's the same case for the turbocharged editions of the engines and powertrains that they're using today. Look at the Mercedes C-Class AMG of this era. I promise you, no matter how fast it is, does not make your skin tingle the way hitting redline in a 4.0-liter naturally aspirated V8 does. So what are some of the positives on the E92 M3? The first positive, you know exactly where I'm going, and it's this bulge right here on the hood. It's the 4-liter naturally aspirated high revving V8. And again, this is the only M3 that BMW ever put a V8 in, and it's exceptional. Think about it, an 8,400 RPM redline is literally unheard of. The only other cars that go above that are generally Ferrari or new Corvette Z06 with flat plane crank V8s that have the ability to rev higher. Another positive, it's the overall handling experience that this E92 delivers. Whether it was the fact that BMW was a little weight conscious with having a V8 and a M3, a car that historically weighed a little less and was known for handling, well, however they translated it was 51% of the weight up front, 49% in the rear, and that leads to a phenomenal handling experience. Throw in the competition package's lowered suspension as well as the adaptive suspension. Unlike the RS5, which had more of its weight to the front and had a tendency to understeer, this M3 has a tendency to let the back end go out, and it's a hell of a lot of fun. Because you know exactly where to expect that this car is going from a handling perspective. Another positive, it's the exhaust notes that come from this E92. Name me an M3 version ever that had exhaust notes better than this E92. Hell, I would put this small V8's exhaust note up against any other car that BMW's produced, including that legendary V8 and V10 from the M5. No, the symphony that comes out the back here is a long lost art. There's no active exhaust on this. There's no artificial notes. This is the furthest thing away from the speakers that Dodge is using on their new EV vehicles to create exhaust notes. No, this is all natural, and even though it's German, it feels very American muscle car-ish. So what are some of the negatives behind the E92 BMW M3? First negative? Well, let's start with the carbon fiber bits. Whether it's this carbon fiber roof, the side mirrors, the ducktail spoiler, or the fascia around the exhaust, I just don't think that the carbon fiber look has aged really well. And I mean that both from a time perspective and an actual aging perspective, because whether it's sun damage or just environmental damage, the carbon fiber bits seem to have disintegrated a little bit. And again, this is a car that's clearly living its full life. I think BMW could have foregone the carbon fiber, but if you are somebody that is towing your M3 track to track, then yeah, you'll probably want the carbon fiber roof, and there you go. Another negative, and they're hard to find, but let's talk about the lack of standard features that come from a creature comfort perspective on the very top trim. Look, we've talked about it. There are no heated or ventilated seats, no heated steering wheel, no sunroof, no adaptive cruise control. Hell, there's not even a backup camera on this car. And it would be very helpful to have a rear camera because this isn't a small car and you really don't have that great of visibility, especially since we just came from the Boxster GTS. I think if you're buying the very top trim, there's just some soft features that should come standard, and BMW kind of just skipped it to give you a bare bones muscle car offering. Another negative, while I do take my hat off to the dual clutch transmission that comes with this 7-speed automatic, I will say it is a little hesitant, a little indecisive when you're at parking lot low speeds. If you're going to back into a spot, when you go from forward to reverse, it wants to spend some time in neutral. So it does give you a little hesitancy that makes you just want to take an extra few seconds when you're going around at low speeds. Honestly, the manual transmission's the way to go in my opinion, always has been. But if you do find yourself with the automatic, it is a great experience, especially once it's underway. And now to answer the question we started with. Put simply, did the E92 represent the very peak of the M3? My answer? Not necessarily. I think that this M3 is the most phenomenal experience out of an M car, and I've had the chance to drive an E46. We've had the chance on this channel to drive the new M4 competition. I think that this M3 of the E92 generation represents a really special, unique one-off time for the M3. Again, BMW never put a V8 in an M3 except for this generation, and they let it be naturally aspirated and have an 8,400 RPM redline. This is truly a phenomenal one-off experience, and if you're lucky enough to have your hands on an E92, do the preventative maintenance, keep care of it, do enjoy it though, because this is a hell of a car that needs to be enjoyed. It's not something that needs to sit in a garage collecting dust. Thank you for watching Test Drive E92 M3. What do you think? What did I get right? What did I get wrong? What are your favorite features of the E92? Do you agree with me that this is a timeless classic that literally represented a single point in time with a phenomenal V8 experience? Or does the slower 0 to 60 and maybe some of the low torque turn you off from this M3? Would you rather have the M4 competition of the new generation or the classic M3 of the E92 generation? If you enjoyed this video, it would mean the world to me if you hit like. And if you want to join us for more test drives, whether it's the M3, the M4 competition, Aston Martin V8 Vantage, Audi RS5, or even the Porsche GTS 4.0 liter, make sure to hit subscribe, because our whole goal is going to be getting our hands on cars like that. Those cars that make you feel. And this M3 absolutely makes you feel.
Also, a number of you have asked for the raw soundtrack behind these cars. Check out my exhaust clips playlist for the M3 compilation alongside other vehicles that we've had our hands on.
If you made it to the end of the video, we appreciate the hell out of you. I'm Alex, your host, and I'll see you on the next test drive.